the truth in an eclipsing world.
So what do you consider the greatest barrier to effective communication between a man and a woman?
Yeah, if I can kind of extend on that, we talk about vulnerability. When husband and wife want to communicate, there has to be an emotional vulnerability. So beyond the example of betrayal that you see, I think in communication too, when one party is being vulnerable, but the other party is not being vulnerable at the same level, but not only are they not being vulnerable, they're not using that information that they're getting against the other person. I think that's another way to damage trust. It's essentially, if you imagine, the Bible says they were naked and they were not ashamed. Imagine if one person is emotionally naked and the other person is not only not emotionally naked, but they're now taking notes.
I need my people to understand a proper definition of emotionally naked.
Yeah, I think that what I mean by that is to be comfortable enough to share fears and hopes and expectations, failures, successes with one spouse. And knowing that at least, even if they have sort of a negative comment to make, they would proceed from a place of understanding first. Or at least, let me just hear you out first, and not a place of judgment. And so when communication starts to break down, when you see that, if one party is being emotionally vulnerable, and that is now being used as a weapon against them, as you mentioned, the party that's vulnerable can say, okay, let me pull back a little bit and let me put my guard back up. And you don't want that in marital communication. You don't want guards up.
Well, I think, thank you so much. I'm sure that my viewers are enjoying, and I'm sure they too have their own opinion and comments which they can put, online as we go on. To what extent do you think cheating or adultery, to what extent do you think those things can hinder communication?
Thank you, Pastor. That's a very, very delicate question. Some people think cheating just can only be physical. There can also be emotional cheating. When you send text to the opposite sex, you delete it. When you have intimate discussions with the opposite sex that is not your husband or your wife, and you delete it, those are emotional cheating. And those kind of attitudes or actions can also break the trust between a husband and a wife.
There are potentials to
Yes.
cause it up.
So when we are talking about now the actual physical cheating, that even goes beyond every other. That's the most hardest part that so many people cannot condone. But also the Bible tells us also that we should be able to forgive. But at the end of the day, sometimes the heart is already troubled. The trust is broken. Sometimes it is very difficult to forgive and forget and move on. And as such, you see couples that will say, okay, let's separate, let's live apart, let's divorce, and so many other things. So at the end of the day, cheating, adultery, it's one of the things that destroys marriages. It goes to the core of the marriage.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, and I agree with all of that, adultery is more than the physical act. There's a sort of a shift in loyalty too, right?
Yeah.
There's a loyalty component to it. But I want to focus a little bit on the spiritual component. And I think this is where a lot of times, even after there's been adultery and there's forgiveness, sometimes the marriage does not go back to where it should be. I think when we see again, go back to the fact that marriage is a covenant. And so there are parties to it that are identified, and God being one of them. So when you look at that, fidelity too, by the way, is an important term of that covenant, right? Yeah. And the vow of fidelity, this is the very important thing. The vow of fidelity that a couple make, right, is to God, right? A person is vowing to God that I'm going to remain faithful to this person. And you're essentially calling God as a witness to that. So when people commit adultery, you are sort of illegally introducing a party into that arrangement that is not supposed to be there.
Because marriage is supposed to be between
It's
two people.
supposed to be between two people.
Two people.
So
Male and female.
male and female. So even after the adultery is discovered, and of course the Bible tells us that when we join our bodies, there's a certain spiritual connection there. So when an illegal third party is introduced, even after the adultery is discovered and forgiven, the impact of that interloper being there, if it's not purposely and intentionally dealt with, can still leave lasting impact on the
Because the scar is always
the scar is always there, and again, I guess, the closest you can be to a person is to marry them. So that's why the betrayal is so terrible, is that the person that you're supposed to be the most vulnerable with, you're supposed to be the most comfortable with that proximity to you, betrayed you. That's why adultery does such damage to a person's trust and to the union that's based on trust.
Yeah, we agree that marriage is a covenant between two people. And I dare say, from so many studies I've done that are Bible-based, sexual intimacy is a form of covenant also. And it's a blood covenant. That's what makes it very, very terrible for a man and a woman to go outside, to go and be having illegitimate or illicit affair. Sexual intimacy is a blood covenant. And therefore, anytime a man and a woman goes outside the home to be involved with somebody else, the other person is bringing in a little bit. That's what he used into the marriage. And it's circumstances that can be very, very difficult. It can be very, very difficult, impossible to move back to that level of trust. That's why one will always advocate that it's best for couples to stay in their vows, trusting God and using God as their witness. Now, there's a situation I've had that because of differences that we have in the way a man is consistent and the woman is consistent, that could also affect communication. What do you think about that?
I'm going to go back to, again, how God figures into the definition of love. I think ultimately, and I agree 100% that men and women are constituted differently. Those differences, however, are not, I don't think they're designed to be barriers or impediments to success in marriage. I think what it creates is an opportunity to continue to bridge the gap between a person's capacity and their spouse's needs in the marriage. So what I mean by that is, if I find that my capacity is a little bit remiss in meeting the needs of my spouse, I shouldn't give up, right? I shouldn't, we've talked about being lawyers here. We weren't born lawyers. We went to school, we learned new skills, and, we apply those skills every single day. In the same way, if there is any delta or gap between my capacity and the needs of my spouse, I think that I should see that as an opportunity to say, okay, how can I bridge that gap? And that's where, considering God and those sacrifices, the given part comes in. Because if I am ever trying to bridge the gap, and my spouse is ever trying to bridge the gap between their limitation and my needs, what you find is we are constantly trying to serve one another. And I think that's really what makes marriage great. When you have someone that is trying to serve you and you're trying to serve them, that is when people are mutually satisfied in marriage. And hopefully it's not lopsided, where, one person is serving and the other person is receiving the service.
But the way I see it, thank you, Gulaji. The way I see it is that I believe those differences as opposed to more or less complement
100%.
each other's potential. Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think also two people coming together, they are supposed to complement each other. Where one is lacking, the other person brings the one that is lacking up, and vice versa. But normally, or what we see in marriages is it's like a competition. Both spouses are in competition. Like,
In some,
do you think you know more than me? Do you think you know more than I do? Or are you trying to impose this on me? Not also understanding the fact that both parties have different roles. Yeah, even though they come together to agree on issues, they have different roles. And at a point, there must be a compromise. But also, at the end of the day, you allow the person that is supposed to lead, while the other person, also, just there should be some form of alignment between both
a
parties.
compromise.
Yes. Yeah. So, but these days they see it as a competition, and nobody wants to give up his or her own ideas, and there's chaos everywhere.
Yeah, if I can I agree with that 100%. And I think that's, we inch towards some of the controversial aspects of the Christian marital doctrine, but it is what it is. The Bible says as it is. Ephesians 5:21 says submit one to another. Ephesians 5:22 says wives submit to your husband. And I agree. I think ultimately,
people always stop at that.
At the
quotation.
5:22.
How about the other part that says husband
love your wives as Christ loved the church, which I think realistically is probably the harder thing to do. I've been on a cruise, and I know there was one captain on the cruise. Even when you fly, there's one captain. If you find that there's more than one, you should not get on that vessel. And I say that to say this. I think it makes sense. Even in a company, you have one CEO. It makes sense that there should be a leader. And in the Christian marriage, God has said that is the husband. What I want to highlight is, and again, we go back to the example of that hierarchy. There's a way that God responded to Jesus Christ's submission, which was, the Bible says, wherefore he had exalted him and given him a name that is above other names. I think, to your point, one of the reasons why contemporarily women find it difficult to accept that leadership is if they're not feeling that they're being lifted up.
They're not being heard.
Exactly.
They're not being taken along.
Exactly.
In the right direction.
Precisely.
Okay.
That's where if a woman feels, particularly in the current society where we know that women are, working and juggling and doing all these things, and so if they're trusting the leadership of the man, but they're feeling like, okay, in response to trusting that leadership, I'm not being lifted up, I'm not being heard, I'm not being carried along, then it becomes kind of difficult. So I just wanted to inject that into the conversation to say, that's a different aspect of it. But I agree 100% that ultimately people need to understand the roles that they fulfill in the household.
Thank you. From personal experience, I see that I've been married for 43 years now. And then dated my wife for 6 years. It's not 49 years, which means I've known my wife as a friend for 50 years. They are important, so to say. And then from counseling I've done for many people, it appears that some women have a preconceived idea as to how they want to be loved, as to how a man should show his love. And then men, on the other hand, seem to have in their head the best way they think they want to show love. Let's address that discrepancy. Malaji.
Yeah, and the thing, I agree, that's the case.
I agree to one.
That women and men come into marriage with their ideas on how they want to be loved. I think it's very important to point out that those expectations can create significant barriers in actually accepting love So the knee-jerk response should be patience. Because here's the other thing too. The way that a 28-year-old woman who is just starting out in life wants to be loved is quite different from the way that a 35-year-old woman who has small children, or a 40-something-year-old woman who has school-age, high school children. So it's very important for people to know that however way you think you want to be loved now, it's going to change. It's going to evolve. In other words, don't make big fights on things that are temporal. Like they are going to expire. Your expectations are going to evolve. And so it's important to be patient and to understand that those things are going to change. But one thing that doesn't change is this. As children of God, God expects that we all should be loved, right? God sort of impacts on us or puts in all of us a need for love. So regardless of what a person's expectation is, as their spouse, it's very important that it's almost like God puts out a job requisition to say, I have a child, they need love, and someone applies for that. So regardless of the barriers created by their expectations, as a spouse, we should know that we are accepting responsibility for expressing love to our spouse, because God believes that our spouse deserves love. So whatever the expectation is, we can't just say your expectations are too high, so I'm not going to do anything. I mean, we still have
I've always advocated, we need to be practical. So I want to ask you, but specifically, in which ways do you expect your husband to demonstrate his love?
Time. I think for me, a big thing is time, to actually devote time to me, you know. I think too, just listening, you know, I want to be listened to. But I'll tell you again about that evolution of expectation. I say this all the time. I want peace. I want a lot of peace. So I want peace. I don't want things that create chaos around me. So I think those are the ways that I would say.
Thank you so much for making yourself vulnerable. In what way do you think you like your wife would want you to express your love to her most of the time?
Well, for me, my wife would prefer time. And would also prefer communication. By communication, I mean you give her time, you talk with her, just talk, just have a quiet time with her, you know. But you know, one thing about marriage is, you know, marriage has stages. So at some point, depending on the level that you are, especially when you are trying to make ends meet and all these things, you find out that you might not have the time. So at the end of the day, it also behoves on the other party to find a way to understand the situation. But sometimes we try to create things from where we cannot create it from. Because you don't expect him to leave his job if he has a very tedious and and to come and give you that time, especially at that particular point in time, because like I said, it's in phases, because that kind of work might not continue for a long time. But at that particular point in time, I try to have that understanding that this is what it is and it's going to improve. But also for the man, also for the other party, it's not something you should totally neglect. Whenever you have time, whenever there's a chance to do it, do it. Don't take it as my own me time and do what you want.
There's an issue here. From the counseling I've done, from personal experience, virtually 90% of women who are married complain about this time thing. They complain about this time thing. And I think the complaint is genuine. But a man that who complains that is busy, haven't got enough subject time for his wife, has sufficient time to go and do some other social activities, like play with friends, play with friends, go to
Soccer games.
and clubs and everywhere else, you might say, hey, wait a minute, give me some of your time. Let's have this, let's have that. Talk to me, yes, ma'am.
First of all, I want to thank you for that, for representing that viewpoint, because I think it's very, very transparent. It's true, you know, particularly as you're raising kids, there's not a lot of time. And I think too that those me time for men should not be undervalued. I think a man should be able to have those times. However, and here's the example I will give. If you build a house or you buy a house and then, you know, for some reason you relocate to another city and, you know, you're working in that other city and you are paying the mortgage on the house, you're paying mortgage on the house, but you don't ever actually come and take care of things. The house does not know that, okay, just because you're paying mortgage, it doesn't fall into disrepair. Whatever happens to a neglected house will happen to that house because it's neglected. Mm-hmm. So I think too, in marriages, regardless of the vicissitudes of life and lifing, it is absolutely essential that the couple continue to find the time. And I think
so that the house will not
it doesn't
so the house will fine at every point in time.
But where creativity can happen is, what does that mean? And, you know, this is one of the things that my husband says is, does it mean instead of, you know, maybe we don't have the time to set up dates that often? So yes, we should still date because, again, that ritual of getting ready and all those things may matter to women. I know it matters to me. But maybe sometimes the date is in the house. Maybe sometimes the date is built around activities that the children are doing. Maybe the walks. Sometimes, you know, you take walks together in the evening. So there's room for creativity there. And I like the word that you shouldn't neglect it all over, because neglect is something, it's kind of like an emotional thing. Is what we don't want is for the spouse to feel like your request for time is entirely unreasonable. Yeah. Don't you see that I'm busy, I'm raising kids? That's where we don't want to get to. But as long as a reasonable spouse is, you're trying to accommodate that and you are really actually looking for time, I think that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, Pastor, one thing I also wanted to add is that, you know, marriage involves work. You have to put in work.
You have to put in work.
To make it, you have to put in time, you have to put in work.
You have to be intentional.
Yes, to make it become a success. If you don't do that, you might end up losing it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Marriage, I think, it also involves responsibility. Each person being responsible for each other. And from the man's perspective, he thinks that, well, I'm looking after her, giving attention, fulfilling my role as a man in the home, etc. All those things that men do, that's the voice of emotion, so to say. Yeah. How can a marriage be handled in such a way that the emotional intelligence will balance up with all those activities that we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very important question, Pastor, because I think that that structure, the economy of the home, of the marriage, has to be seen as valuable, right? Because there's an economy to marriage. Money has to come in, money is going out. So if the man is the only one providing that, because again, we live in a society where that economy is being fed by input from the man and the woman. But if the man is the only one providing that, then there has to be value placed on that. There has to be a lot of value placed on that. The fact that I think a woman who is the homemaker, whose spouse, the husband is the only one working, needs to understand that takes a toll. Being the primary financial provider takes a toll. I don't recommend that.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. It takes a toll to be the primary financial provider. Don't you think the woman herself should be paid? There should be a financial value on the fact that she's responsible at home take care of our children, as many things.
100%. Because, after all, if they take the kids to daycare, they'll play daycare.
Exactly.
I think in that sense, what the woman is contributing to is also very valuable. As the person keeping the home, that is also very, very valuable.
And there should be a value.
There should be a value that is acknowledged,
And placed on it.
that is recognized for that as well. But again, for the couple to both understand in that situation that they are both contributing something of value. And so when you hear things like maybe the husband is the only one providing the money, and that you hear discussions like, what do? You just stay home. That is not true.
That's not true.
In fact, child care in this country is extremely expensive. And so if the woman is staying home and caring for their children, that is a valuable contribution to the marriage and should be acknowledged and recognized.
Okay, I don't want this discussion to go on and on, because I know that my people online, social media, can sometimes be very impatient about the way we demand of their time. So I want to ask this final question. What are the things that contribute to marriage failure primarily? And the list is endless. We can't sit there and talk about marriage for life.
Yeah.
But let's mention a few important things that can really destroy marriage.
Well, from my experience as a lawyer, most of the couple that come to file for divorce, the major issue I've seen is finances.
Money
issues.
ego.
Yeah. And, there's also this traditional opinion, because we're living in modern times, that women have, or generally people have, that the man is ideally supposed to provide for the family. But, situations change, things happen. And the tide turns, and the woman becomes a breadwinner. And you see the woman, shouting, it's not my job, I'm only doing it to assist, and I can't handle this anymore. I understand, but practically, you guys are one. So, finances, then adultery, cheating is the second most common one.
So, a man and a woman must come together to have a proper agreement as to how they're going to manage finances for the home. Then secondly, a man and a woman must make sure that adultery does not count, or cheating in any form, to the marriage. What have you gone through?
Two things. One, I would say untreated trauma from childhood. That's a message for the single people too, that you can start laying the foundation for a really good marriage now by dealing with childhood trauma. When people bring childhood trauma, and I'm not talking about trauma of abuse, I'm talking about, difficulties with the kind of parents that raised a person. Maybe the parent wasn't the most expressive in terms of emotion, and that impacted a person. When we bring that into marriage, it can cause serious issues. So I would say one thing is childhood trauma that is not treated, or any other kind of trauma that is not treated. The other thing is, and I think this aligns with what you're saying a little bit, is when people get married but they still want to remain single.
Guys, okay,
Yeah, so you're married but you want to do your own thing, pursue your own dreams. And it has to be underscored that every time you sacrifice the couple for the individual, the couple is going to suffer. So when you decide to get married, you are prioritizing being a couple. But I'm not saying lose your individuality, not at all. But the couple goals, the goals of the unit, right? The issues of the unit, it has to have priority. And then even how you define yourself as an individual is the same way. If you're unemployed, you behave differently than, if you have a job, right? You can't continue to behave like you're unemployed if you have a job that you have to report at one day. So if you are married, there are certain restraints and constraints that you have to embrace because you're married. When people don't want to acknowledge those constraints and restraints, it creates problems in marriages.
Yeah, and Pastor, if I may add something.
The final note. Yes.
Yes. The issue of marriage counseling, it's very, very important.
Absolutely.
Because I've found out from experience that there are some things that couples do that they think it's normal when they are married, but it's way out of line. And just like you said, you have to see yourselves as now one person, not that you want to live your own individual life. So, and this marriage counseling should be in stages. I think the first 5 years, there should be another marriage counseling. Maybe after 15 years, there should still, yes, definitely
touch up.
Because marriage, you consistently learn. Because don't forget that this is two different people from two different backgrounds that have come together. So there are things that you might not have seen earlier that can start manifesting later on.
Yes.
And I mean, it becomes strange to you, and you think the person is going out of line, whereas it's still that same person, but it's coming out at a much later stage.
Yeah.
I think consistently, what you said is very true because marriage is a teamwork. And when you look at the way teams are formed, there are various stages. There's a forming stage, which is like when we're dating and all those kind of things. And then soon after you cross the altar, go into storms. That dating stage can take about 4, maybe 5 years. When you go into storms, that's where you now begin to integrate with one another. That's when you begin to ask, okay, what baggage has he or she brought into this family? And that is a kind of stormy stage that can go for almost 10 years, so to say. Yeah, as a matter of fact, most marriages break up towards the end of the stormy stage. But in the stage of storming, children can come in, and once children come in, they're going to introduce a different parameter to the way the man and the woman communicate. If there's a loss of income on one party or the other, if there's too much interference from friends and relations, all those things. And after the stormy stage, they come to a stage that we call normal stage, which is the normal stage. Now, that means I've accepted that this is the person I'm married.
That's the syphilis stage. The syphilis stage.
That is kind of for another stage before you come to performing stage. Well, viewers, I'm sure you have enjoyed what we are talking about. And marriage discussion is endless. But the only thing we can just conclude right now with everything I've said, number one, the wife wants to be loved all the time, continuously. It's left for the man to find ingenious way by which he can love his wife. The wife wants to be touched. The wife wants to be assured that no matter whatever is happening to her physiologically, you are still there. He managed to do that. On the other hand, the man wants to be respected. He does not want to be shouted upon. He does not want to be abused. He does not want to be insulted. And once those two areas are taken care of, the marriage has a good chance of surviving. Well, we are the open pulpit. Balaja, thank you so much. Daniel, thank you so much. And as people, I really thank you. And we still remain the open pulpit. And if you enjoy what you've seen, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. God bless you. Be good. Amen.
Emphasizing the truth in an eclipsing world.